And I don't know what pivot you've had to make. I don't know if it's a job change. I don't know your story, but I know that we're all in this together. And my encouragement to you would be this. Don't allow the loss of a platform, the loss of a job, the loss of something that felt like a core identity thing from you to make you believe that you've lost your ability to step into your calling.
Welcome to the Daron Earlewine Podcast, where we awaken you to become who you were born to be. Here's your host, Daron Earlewine.
Hey, welcome to the Daron Earlewine Podcast, where I will awaken you to become who you were born to be. Oh my gosh, I'm stoked, guys. It's episode 1 of the Daron Earlewine Podcast, here with you live. Well, it's not live, but let's say it's live. It feels great to both of us. I'm so excited about launching this brand new podcast, and it'll be on YouTube each and every week. It'll be on wherever you get your audio podcasts each and every week. And I'd love you to get more connected with what we're doing here at DaronEarlewine.com. And that's actually where you can go to the website, DaronEarlewine.com, to stay and to get more connected, as well as anywhere out on social. Just search for Daron Earlewine. Last name, it's easy. It's just Earl E. Wine. It's very hard to say. A lot of people say Earl Wine, but no, the E is actually not silent. It actually makes noise, but it should be a Y, but it's not. It's an E. Too much information. Just search Daron Earlewine on Facebook or Instagram, and we can stay connected. So excited about this podcast. I got this awesome little podcast thing here. And so throughout the time we're doing the podcast, we may need sound effects. You never know. I think sometimes sound effects are good. Like, let's say we're coming back from a situation. I'm talking about maybe a dream. Like, you've got a dream. You just need this in the background. Boom. Am I right or am I right? All of a sudden, you just felt like you transitioned into like a dreamland. That's how it works. What if I say something that it's a little awkward? We're not sure if I should have said that on the air. Watch this. Crickets, right? Crickets in the background. You don't know. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I'm killing it. Okay, that's enough crickets. That got a little creepy there, didn't it? Because hey, if things get creepy, I just push this button. Watch this. Scary noise. See, I'm going to have too much fun with these. If you have different maybe sound effects you want to see as a part of the podcast, send them in, right? Because I can just put them on a little pad here, and we got it. Like, maybe I tell a joke. Hey, well, I'm going to be here all weekend. Hey, there it was. See how that works? I've got all the sound effects. I love it. You're going to love it. And if you do love it, just the applause. Just keep it coming. Keep it coming. Just keep applauding all day long. Okay, no more sound effects. No, seriously, hey, I am really excited about this podcast and the journey of putting this podcast together. I just kind of want to kind of connect the dots for you. And there's a reason I want to. And it's this, is that a part of starting this podcast has been the process of trying to pivot into my purpose since the pandemic started. I'll try my best not to alliterate everything in the podcast. However, just a little teaser, the second point of the podcast, they're all starting with the letter P as well. So this is, if this is Sesame Street, today's podcast is brought to you by the letter P. Rimshot. Hey, all right, sorry. Enough with the sound effects, Daron. That's goofy. But here's the deal. We started this podcast because if you followed what's going on in my life or Blackbird Mission, you know that we, for the past couple of years, have had a couple main ministries. We have Pub Theology, where we go out and take the message of Jesus and love of Jesus to the spaces and places of everyday life, and chief among those being bars. And then we also had Radio Theology, which was a radio, your weekly dose of faith, hope, love, and music that we did here in Indianapolis, is where we're recording this podcast, on WZPL, one of the top pop station here in Indianapolis. And we had that ministry for about 3.5 years. And then we also have the Spiritual DNA Workshop, which we'll talk a lot about here on the podcast. But when the quarantine hit and COVID took over, the radio show was furloughed. It was gone. And I had a podcast that we did before that as well. But all of a sudden, I was at a place as back in March and April, May, where I didn't know really what I was going to do. And was my calling or my purpose, was it wrapped up in that platform? And when it was gone, it was a hit to my identity. It was a hit to my confidence. And my guess is that you're listening to this right now, and it may not have been what I've gone through, but you have gone through something as this pandemic hit that has made you feel unsettled. Your sense of identity or confidence has been shaken since March. I know the office that we have here as a part of Blackbird Mission, which is our nonprofit, is there's a 4-story parking garage. And before March, every single day, all 4 stories of that parking garage were full. Now I could probably practice golf in the parking lot, and I would never hit a car. Rim shot. There we go. It's empty because if you're listening to this, you may still be working at home. Things have changed. And in those moments, we feel unsettled. We're not sure what's going on. And what happened for us as a ministry, what happened for me as an individual, is I had to come back and go, okay, God, what is true about me? What is my sense of calling and the gifts you've given me? And are those actually able to be canceled by a pandemic? And that's what I want to hit you on with right here at the beginning of the podcast, episode 1, is that your sense of calling and the gifts that God has given you are irrevocable. Let that soak in for a second. The gifts and abilities and calling that God has placed upon your life are irrevocable. That means they can't be taken away. They can't be canceled. They can't be affected to where they don't exist or aren't applicable because of a pandemic, because of something in your past, because of anything. And I don't know if you have a team of people around you to encourage you. I'm so grateful that I do, that have had to grab me by the scrap of the neck of calling and say, listen, stop being sad. Stop being a sad panda. Stop being sulking about that things aren't what they used to be. It's time to step into who God's created you to be and to lead. And I want to give a huge shout out here in episode 1 to Darren Cooper, the creative director of our ministry. Couldn't have done any of this without him. I want to give a huge shout out to John Mobley, who John's come along and been a creative consultant with what we're doing. He actually even came in to our office one day and kind of shared I would say it's kind of a prophetic word with me and said, hey, man, I think you need to do a podcast that looks like this, and here's what it could be. And it was like one of those moments where someone's talking, you go, yeah, I think that was more than him talking. I think that God was saying, hey, I'm sending John to help you. And I want to give another big shout out to Jen McBurney, the executive director of Blackbird Mission, for her encouragement, for helping get all the stuff going on that we have going on here for the podcast and just for the ministry in general. And here's the deal. I found this quote this week that I thought was great that might help you in this one. It's from Albert Einstein, right? Albert says this, my hair is awesome and so is my mustache. Oh, there's the joke. Just kidding. I can't with the buttons, guys. They're too much fun. I'm sorry. That's not the quote from Albert Einstein. Here is the quote, though. He says this: life is like riding a bicycle. In order to keep your balance, you must keep moving. Right? Life is like a bicycle. In order to keep your balance, you must keep moving. Here's what I know about you and me. The past 4 or 5 months have taken our balance away from us. And if we're going to be able to stay balanced and move into the calling and into the purpose that God has created us for, which is what I want to do every single week here, is encourage you and awaken you and equip you to become who you're born to be, you got to keep moving forward. You got to keep moving forward. And I want to encourage you with this, is that the gifts of God in your life and your calling are irrevocable. That comes from, I'm not making that up. It's not just something that I thought this would be a cool thing to inspire people. It's actually from the Bible. The Apostle Paul in the book of Romans, he says this, right? Romans 11:29, he says, for God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. And I don't know what pivot you've had to make. I don't know if it's a job change. I don't know your story, but I know that we're all in this together. And my encouragement to you would be this: don't allow the loss of a platform, the loss of a job, the loss of something that felt like a core identity thing from you to make you believe that you've lost your ability to step into your calling, or that you had gifts and abilities that you thought could only be used at that certain job or in that certain opportunity. For me, as the radio show went away, it's like, well, I don't know what I do. That I had an opportunity to talk to tens of thousands of people. Now what am I supposed to do? Well, God has given me a gift to speak and to use my voice to impact and encourage people. So we just had to make a small pivot. A small pivot. We're not a radio station. We're in this studio that we put together, but it's giving me an opportunity to make a small pivot into that purpose and realize that, listen, God has given me gifts. He's given me a calling, and they're irrevocable. So if you're listening right now and something has changed, maybe it's not the pandemic. Maybe for you, it's the rear view mirror. And you're looking at your past and you're going, you know what? I've got these things I've done. Maybe you've made some poor decisions during the quarantine. Maybe there's been some things, some demons of the past, if you will, or some struggles, some addictions that have come up in your life right now. And you're just thinking, you know what? I just canceled out my ability to actually use the gifts and calling that God has placed in my life. That's a lie straight from the pits of hell, my friend. because we serve a God who is for us, not against us, and he actually specializes in forgiveness. He specializes in redemption. He specializes in reconciliation. He specializes in resurrecting dreams. You're going to get to hear about that later in the podcast as we have an interview with Amy Barg, and this story is just off the charts amazing. It's going to blow your mind of how she actually began to see God resurrect dreams that she never thought would have life again. It's going to blow your mind as we talk about it. But I want to encourage you with it. Is that the gifts and the call God has in your life, they're irrevocable. Don't believe anything less than that, and keep moving so you can find your balance. Well, I'm going to close this portion of the podcast with this quote. Jen sent this one to me this week. I love it. It's from Corrie ten Boom. You may have heard of her. She's a survivor from the Nazi death camps in World War II. She says this: if you look at the world, you'll be distressed. If you look within, you'll be depressed. If you look at God, you'll be at rest. In this place that we're at right now in the world, the new normal, I hate that phrase. I can't stand it, but it is, I mean, it's around. It is. You keep hearing it everywhere. Is if you only look at the world around you, you're going to be distressed. My wife this week was like, you know what? I'm done. I got to take a break from Facebook. I'm not reading the news. I'm going to take a month off. And literally it's been like 3 days and she's like a different person. You need to realize that if you're filling your mind constantly right now on the uncertainty, you're looking at the world, you're looking at the pain, the struggle, the hate, if you're looking through everybody's opinion that is void of a godly perspective on Facebook or wherever it's at, you're going to be distressed. And that's not where God wants you to be or to stay or to marinate. That's bad juices. You don't need that. If you just look within, you might get depressed, because I know about you, but I tend to try to sabotage my life often. We have a thing called a sinful nature, and if you just look at that part of yourself, it can be easy to get depressed of the same patterns and maybe how slow it's taking you to grow. But I want to encourage you to look at God, because that is where you'll find rest. That's where you'll find peace. That's where you'll find the truth about him. And the truth that we're focusing on today is no matter what's happening, no matter what pandemic, no matter what past, your calling and your gifts are irrevocable. Step into them, my friend. Keep moving, because God has great things for you. I want to hit you with a little extra thought today as well. It's time to go back to school, huh? Oh, and the crowd goes wild. The crowd goes wild. We're not going to get tired of the sound effect buttons. I can tell you that right now. They're a blast. So I had a dream that my kids went back to school. And then they said, no, your kids aren't going back to school. They're actually going to start virtually. Yes, and it was scary. It was very scary that happened. But that's the truth. My kids aren't going back to school in a classroom. They are going virtually starting this week. And what I've had to realize through this is a great quote that a mentor of mine once said to me. Is actually right before my wife and I were having kids. We said, hey, this great mentor, pastor down in North Carolina, he had raised 3 great sons. And I said, Pastor Dan, I said, what is a quote that I need to remember that would shape and kind of be foundational for me as a parent? And he said, here it is. He said, more is caught than is taught. And I thought, oh, that rhymes. We could get that as a tattoo. That's great. More is caught than is taught. And then I started to really think about what he said, and I realized that's terrifying. Like, wait a second. You mean I could say all the right things to my kids, but it's actually the way I live that they're going to absorb? Like, no thanks. Can we reverse that? I would like it to be more is caught. No, wait, no, the other way. I want to say more is taught than, wait, it's got to be your bull. I don't know. Hey, how about some laughter for that one? That's a good Tommy Boy quote here on the podcast. But seriously, once again, I love sound effect things. More is taught than is caught. I wish that was the case, right? And you could say, hey, your kids don't pay attention a lot to what's going on in your life. It's just, if you could get them a couple good speeches, you know what I mean? Download a couple good speeches, like give them a good JFK speech, give them an MLK speech. Who knows? Anybody has initials in their name, give them their speech. Things will be great, okay? That doesn't happen, and that's the struggle for me, because what I do in life is talk. So if it could just be more is taught than is caught, I would be the greatest parent ever. The issue is your kids are catching your life. Your life is contagious, and we're not talking about coronavirus here. We're talking about our lives in the way we show up. And so this week, as my kids are going back to school, my wife and I have been trying to deal with the disappointments of it all. We've not done great. Let me just say that. If you feel like this hasn't been, the past 4 months have not been your all-star parenting months, welcome to the parade, okay? But this week I came across a scripture, and I thought, I'm going to share this on the podcast because I think it's apropos for the time that we're in, the space in life, and it's a very well-known passage of scripture, but it hit me different this week. It's from Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. I'm going to read it from the Passage translation, which is my new favorite translation of the Bible. It's bringing the word alive in great ways for me. But it says this: dedicate your children to God. That's a great starting point, right? And it says, and point them in the way that they should go. And when I read that, I thought, that's teaching, right? That's what's taught. That felt good. I'm going to point my children, right? I'm going to dedicate them to God. I'm going to point them in the way that they should go. And then this next line jumped off the page for me. It says this: and the values they've learned from you will be with them for life. And as I read that, what hit me was, that's the caught part. Like, I can point them in the way they should go, and I'm going to do that. We got to teach our kids, right? But it's the values they've learned from me. That's the things they're catching. And so right now, here's 3 things I want to hit you with as we're at a waypoint of life change here. If you've got kids, maybe you are a kid, your kids are either going to school virtually or they're going to school, actually going to class. And I think for most of us, there are a couple major waypoints where we consider making life changes or recalibrating our life. A lot of times it's the first of the year, right? New year, new you. Although it never really works because it's a new year, same you. But the first of the year, then you have like maybe the start of summer. You're like, okay, we're going to be getting out. Got to wear shorts again. Maybe I should try to go to the gym, less bonbons. And then it's going back to school, right? Summer's over. Let's go back to school. We got to get back to what we're doing. And so whether your kids are going back or not, this is a great time for us to recalibrate our life, because we've been shaken and stirred since March, okay? So here, I want you to say we're alliterating everything today. Today, brought to you by the letter P. Thank you, Rimshot. It's this, right? Here are the 3 things that I want us to think about as we're looking at what is caught, not taught to our kids. First one is this: presence. How are you showing up every day? And I have told couples this when I do premarital counseling, is that I've never accidentally become patient with my wife, right? We talk about like, well, we fall into love, we just fall into it. No, you don't really fall into it. You choose it, and it's really difficult. So I've never fallen into being patient, like showing up with a patient, perspective and attitude with my kids. And I don't think I've shown up let me just be honest. I've not shown up that well over the past 4 months. My presence hasn't been what I want it to be as a parent. And so I want to encourage you to take a look at that. Offer yourself a lot of compassionate curiosity in the process. But I think what could happen for us, if we're not showing up the way we want with our presence, this next P may help us, and it's our priorities. I've had to go back over the past couple of weeks and look at, what are the priorities for me that allow my life to be stable even in difficult times? And am I eating well? Am I sleeping well? Am I exercising? You say, well, Darren, that's not the spiritual stuff. What about praying, fasting, and meditating? You need to do those things. But I know for me to show up and have good presence in my life with my kids, that they are learning, I could teach them, rely on the Lord and really follow God. But if what they're catching is when things get crazy at home or things get crazy in life and in the world, Dad is a nutcase. Right? That's not what I want them to see from me. I want them to see that my presence is something that actually is a reflection of God's Spirit within me. And for me to do that well, I've got to take a look at my priorities. And so this week, Thursday of this week, they're going to go back to e-learning. Guess what? We've got a new schedule in our house. This is when everybody goes to bed. This is when we wake up. I'm getting back to the gym. I'm bringing these priorities back in my life, because when my priorities are out of whack, my presence is not what I want it to be. And I don't want my kids to catch that from me. The last thing is purpose, right? Presence, priorities, purpose. As we're stepping back into this season for our kids, I want to encourage you is to double down on God's call on your life. And let me make it just real simple, because I know we talk a lot about our spiritual DNA course. We will here on the podcast, and discovering all these unique abilities and strengths that God has given you. But I want to just boil down to this, is to get our minds around that our number one purpose is to love the Lord our God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Your number one purpose in life is love. And if we can get our minds around our priorities, we can begin to have our presence reflect that of God. What's going to happen is we're going to become a person that reflects and actually is present with love, meaning that we're patient, we're kind, we're gentle, we persevere, we hope. And I think that's all what we want our kids to learn and to be, all we want our kids to learn and to be a part of. And so, yeah, there's an encouragement for you. And if that doesn't work, I don't even have a joke for it. I'm just glad my kids are going to have some kind of routine going forward, because the past 4 months has not worked. All right. Hey, we're going to head into here on the podcast so you guys know a little bit what you can expect. We're going to have me talking about stuff like I just did, little thought of the days. We're going to talk about culture, our life, what's happening. And then each week we're either going to have a segment that's called a Born to Be interview. We're going to talk to somebody who is really stepping into who God's created them to be. Or we're going to do a spiritual DNA results deep dive. We're going to talk to somebody who's gone through spiritual DNA and really unpack the results as a way to equip you and awaken you to take some steps. And maybe you'll see yourself in their results and say, oh man, like that's my next step. That's what God's doing in my life. And through the Born to Be interviews, I want these to be things that inspire and awaken you and begin to expand your imagination for what God may do in your life. And this week, we're releasing the episode, the Born to Be episode, right here on the podcast with Amy Barg. And Amy came to me through a couple different friends, and I did know her story when we sat down. And within 5 minutes, guys, I was absolutely enthralled in this story. And we'll talk about it after I come back. But I'll talk a lot here on the podcast, I guarantee you, about death of a dream, because we all experience them. Sometimes multiple times. The good news about following Jesus is he actually specializes in resurrecting dreams. And what I want you to jump into this interview right now and listen to what Amy has to share is this. The quote that she brings is that sometimes we get into life when we experience the death of a dream, and she has experienced a lot of pain. But she says this: there's times when we get to a place where we hurt enough that we have to change, where we learn enough that we want to change, and that we receive enough that we're able to change. This interview is going to inspire you. Let's jump right now into my interview with Amy Barg. Hey, welcome back to another Born to Be interview. Once again, the Zoom sessions, and we are here with the one and only. I don't know if that's true. I've not searched, for the name, but we're here with Amy Barg. And Amy, you are a trainer, a coach, a speaker, and your story is phenomenal of the way that God has directed you to truly become who you were born to be. And I'm so excited to just jump in and get your story out there for all the viewers and all the listeners, because yours is a very, what I love is it's an everyday story of someone who you just thought, you know what, this is probably what my life's going to be. And then, it quick got flipped, turned upside down. And the journey after that has taken you to really step into some awesome adventures and to become who God's created you to be. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. It's fun to get to have this time with you.
Absolutely. So we're just going to go, I want to go kind of back to those beginning thoughts, because you are a speaker now, you're a trainer, you're a coach. You've got a book that we're going to talk about that I want people to get on and get and be able to get their hands on. But if we go back to early days, Amy, those weren't your expectations or dreams as a kid, were they?
No, they weren't. I really thought that I would live in Missouri my entire life, be married, teaching school, raising my 3 kids. And what ended up happening was I went through a really difficult divorce about 20 years ago that completely changed everything. And it forced me really to make some major changes in my life that I'm sure I would not have done otherwise. At the time, I didn't welcome it, and I certainly wouldn't have wished it on anybody, but I can look back now and see that because of that, it really has, that was the catalyst for me becoming, who I am and what I'm doing today.
Amy, if you don't mind me asking, how long were you married before that divorce took place?
I was married for 20 years. So
20
really
years.
half of my life. Yeah.
So you're saying that through childhood, you thought maybe I'm a teacher, Missouri's my home, I'll get married, I have the family. And for the majority of your life, that was intact.
Yes, that was it.
And then in a moment, this dream that I've had since childhood that I was literally living, it's gone.
Yep. Yeah,
You know,
it really was. I've described it as if you had a deck of cards and you threw them all up in the air and they all scattered, and now you're trying to like put them back together into some semblance of order. That's what my life felt like at that point.
Amy, I know you're not the first person or the last person that's going to go through something like that. And one thing that we talk about here on the podcast often is, I don't know that I've ever talked to anybody over the age of maybe 15 who hasn't experienced some kind of death of a dream. You know, they had some dream, whether it was a childhood dream, whether it was something that was birthed in them through college, but they chased it, they pursued it. It became so much of their identity. And then either by decisions of their own or decisions by someone else, the dream dies. And, you know, I think it's at that point we have a choice of dying with that dream and just existing, right? Or coming to a place where what I always talk about is what I love about a relationship with Jesus is the fact that he's really good at death and resurrection, right? It's kind of his specialty.
Yes.
And so it's amazing to come to a place where you begin to trust him to resurrect a new dream in your life. And that's what, you know, as we've talked before and gone through some of your story, that's really the process you've taken. And so I guess take us through some of the stories of that season, and then just the resurrection of the dream that you're living right now.
Yeah. So it was interesting because I remember having a very exact moment where I was so angry at God. I remember it's like saying out loud, like, I am done with you. This is over. Like, I can't believe you let this happen to me. And that lasted about a day. And then I realized, okay, wait a minute. I've believed in God my whole life. I have seen him show up and take care of me. Why would I think that that's going to change now just because my circumstances have changed? So I decided, okay, sorry, God, I'd rather have you with me than not with me.
Yeah.
So that it was funny because it really did only last about a day.
Do you feel like, Amy, do you feel like it was important to be that honest in that moment with God?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things. I think that probably allowed me the freedom that since then I've had many moments like that where not that I wanted to completely turn away, but where I have really like wrestled. And I remember one day laying in the floor, like pounding my fist against the floor going, why is this happening? And then, you know, I went on and something else happened and I kept moving. But I think it's necessary to have those real ugly moments.
Yeah. So you got to one of those, you got really honest, and then 24 hours later, you were like, you know what? No, we'll keep going.
Yeah. Glad I made that decision.
And then how did God begin to show up and I guess honor your honesty from that?
Yeah. So one of the big things that happened, I ended up leaving my career as an educator. Honestly, I couldn't afford to stay as a teacher. I had to do something else. And even in the way he brought me to different jobs, it was amazing how that all happened. It's like lots of stories. But at one point I was working in downtown Chicago and I really felt like it was time to do something else. It was time to leave Chicago because it was expensive to live there. My kids were grown and gone at that point. I'm like, why am I staying here? And so I quit my job. I put my house on the market, and I remember so vividly, I had to let a realtor in one day for a showing. They didn't have a key or something. And as this couple stepped across the threshold, this thought came to me, these people are going to buy your house. And it was so bizarre and like out of the blue that I didn't even tell anybody because I thought nobody's going to believe this. They're going to think I'm crazy. But less than a week later, that couple gave me a full price offer on my home.
Wow.
So I really felt like that was God saying, yes, go ahead and move. But I had a lot of fear around that move because I was leaving everything I had known. I moved to Indiana, moved in with my sister and her family, didn't have a job or a place to live. And I started looking for both. And I found this area that had beautiful brand new townhomes being constructed with woods and a creek. And I remember saying this out loud, I want to be in that spot, that corner lot overlooking that woods and that creek. And they told me, oh, that's been sold, So I was like, okay. But I continued to drive through that neighborhood as I kept looking for a job. And I'll never forget it. It was the day before my birthday. They called me and said, get over here. The woman who had bought that unit that was under construction had to back out. Do you want it? And I walked in. Not only was it the unit that I wanted, it was the exact floor plan that I wanted.
Wow.
And I remember my best friend saying to me, Amy, you trusted God during all those difficult times in your divorce. Maybe you need to trust him for something good in your life, because I didn't have a job. Like, how do you buy something without a job? So I said, okay. And I bought it thinking, okay, surely in 2 months, by the time we close, I'll have a job, because I had a lot of interviews. Well, we get up right up to closing, no job. So I'm like, oh, God, why? This isn't right. I'm supposed to get the job and then, the house, and I'm trying to do it the right way. So I was able to use the money from the house that I had sold in Chicago. And then I had to sell a bunch of this stock that I had gotten as part of my divorce settlement. That was in May of 2008. So I buy this townhome outright, thinking not my plan.
Right.
Well, that fall is when the whole stock market crashed and everything happened. Yeah. My financial advisor called me and he goes, hey, remember that stock that you sold in the spring so that you could buy your home? I'm like, yeah. He said, yeah, it was $42 a share when you sold it. Guess what it is right now? I had no idea. Less than $4 a share.
Wow.
And I remember in that moment thinking, okay, I couldn't see the reason why, and yet clearly there's something bigger than me that is, watching over me and orchestrating that. I told my friends I wanted to take out a full page ad in the Indy Star and say, God is alive and at work, because I just felt like he was just blessing me so much through that. So yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Amy, and one of the things I love what you just said is that idea of trusting God for something good. And I think so often for so many of us, it's like, when things fall apart, that's when we really trust God, because we can, lean into his everlasting arms. You got all the scriptures about depending on him. Yep. But I think it's a totally different kind of trust that we don't, I think we struggle to maybe believe that he's that good, like he's dependable, but is he really for me in the future? You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And that was why when my friend said that to me, it was a pivotal moment, because she was right. I had, through all the, I had hung in there, but this was something that was so my heart's desire to have this beautiful home. And I mean, this sounds like a small detail, but I knew I wanted my parents and my kids to be able to come there. I wanted them to have their own bedroom with their own bathroom. So I wanted the 2 master suites. No other townhomes in that row had the 2 master suites except the one that I wanted. And that's the one I got. I mean, that level of detail just of goodness blew my mind.
Amy, let's go back. You talked about the pivotal decision. You're downtown Chicago, you're working, and basically risking everything that you had. Major change. And I know that you shared with me earlier that there are 3 things that you've discovered that actually need to be present for people to be able to actually change. And so that's a huge change. And it would have been so simple and probably maybe more rational for you to say, listen, I'm going to stay here. I know some people, I'll grit it out. I'll try to do it on my own, but you didn't. And a lot of that was you trusting in God, but you've made a lot of change in your life. And we're going to get into that about what you're doing with, you've gotten connected with the John Maxwell organization. You're a coach, you're a trainer, you're speaking, you've written a book. But unpack for us some of those key things you've discovered that are present to actually be able to allow you to make some of those changes.
Yeah, and this was a big aha for me. And this really came after I got connected with the John Maxwell team, because I really started learning and growing. And what I learned is that there's only 3 times that people change. The first is when they hurt enough that they have to.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That can go lots of different directions. I'll talk more about that in a second. The second one is when they learn enough that they want to, And the third is they receive enough that they're able to. And so when I started looking at my own life, I realized, the hurt of my divorce was so deep that it really did force me to make those big changes, selling my house, quitting my job, moving away from everything. I would never have done that if I'd stayed married. I know I wouldn't. But then the learning enough, because I left education, which that in itself was a huge, stepping out of my comfort zone. I mean, when you're a teacher, you're usually, you can do that for life if you want.
Yeah.
But I've learned through all of the different jobs that I've had since then, 6 different jobs I've had, that there was something in me that really wanted to have my own business. And so that was a process of growth. And then the receiving enough has been that because I really believe, again, God led me to the John Maxwell team. Through that, this is now I'm on my 6th year of this, I have received so much from my mentors, from John Maxwell himself, from the community of folks that are in that team, that has led me to this place where, you know what? I really embrace change in a way that I know I didn't before, and I'm not sure that I would have if I hadn't gone through all the stuff that I've gone through. So, yeah.
Amy, I see so many people that get stuck between hurt and learn. And they just want to stay in hurt. And a lot of times their pain becomes their identity. Yeah. It becomes their identity. It becomes their excuse. It becomes in some weird way kind of their comfort, even though it's pain. Do you have can you speak to that at all? How do you not get stuck in the hurt and allow the learning to pull you through that?
Yeah, well, definitely a process.
Yeah.
I know for me, part of the reason that, definitely my faith in God, but I was raised by 2 parents who had the most amazing, positive mindset, probably of anybody that I've ever known. And that was modeled to me all throughout my life. So it's there could be a hard thing, but you pick up and you keep moving. And the other part of it is I realized that I could look at people's lives who had remained bitter, and I didn't want that. There's a quote, and I won't be able to say it perfectly, but it's kind of like, if you allow the bitterness to take hold of you, it's kind of like you put yourself in a coffin and put the lid on it, and then you're not living anymore anyway. And another image that I've used for myself in this is, if you pick up a water bottle, which is not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It can be either one, but you just hold it. There comes a point when it's so painful to keep holding that you can't do anything else, because now you got to use both hands. And so I didn't want that to be the way I lived. And it's there has to be a point where I say, enough. That, yes, it hurt. Yes, it was awful. I absolutely acknowledge pain. And what can I learn through this? And how can I step and take whatever the next right step is? And so, believe me, I did not do it all on my own. I had a lot of people who came around me and supported me, but I know that was in me from my parents.
I love that, Amy. And I think it does come down. I think about the scripture where it talks about, where the seed of bitterness and discontent, how it can take root in our soul. And once it takes root, it can ruin the whole field, or whatever the scripture says. But I think that's so key and such a huge principle there that you've brought out. And I love those things when you realize that so much of the truth that we find in the scriptures, they're not just, throwaway, cliche bumper sticker, right? And sometimes you feel that way until you live it. And then you realize, oh, Jesus wasn't just saying stuff about forgiveness. You know what I mean? Right. It wasn't just a novel idea. It's literally if you don't forgive, if you don't move away from bitterness, you can't change that you've been through the pain, but you can forfeit all of the joy of your future if you can't actually begin to learn, if you can't begin to actually receive the positive, let go of that bitterness and move on. You've done it. You said it wasn't easy. It's not easy. It's not a magic trick, right? It's a process. It takes a lot of people. It takes continual decisions in the right direction. You did that, and it led you to what you're doing now with coaching, training, speaking. Get us into that story of, I grew up loving John Maxwell. I grew up in Arizona, and in his early years, he was a pastor of a church called Skyline out in San Diego. And as a kid, we would go every year to like the district conference of the church denomination we were a part of. And it was always hosted at Skyline. And obviously John was, the stud of the century out there. And I remember I had just received, a call of my call into ministry when I was 16, and we went over there that year. And I remember my dad pulled John aside and between one of the sessions and asked him if he would lay hands on me and just pray for me as a, prayer blessing. And it is a pivotal, moment for me. And I've loved John's stuff. I listen to him all the time and have gone to conferences where he's been for years. And when I knew that you were connected with him, I was excited to hear a little bit about that in that process. So take us into, you get over it, you move past the bitterness. We've got the townhouse. We're recreating a life. Now all of a sudden, this Missouri school teacher is a coach, a trainer, a speaker, right? Get us there.
Yeah. So that was a crazy thing too. And like a little sidebar, in the midst of all that, I did meet the man that I am now married to, who is like such a gift to me. That's another whole story about how God brought him into my life. And I will just say this about that. I met Sam 2 months or 4 months before my mom died. He met my mom once, 2 weeks before she died. And then we got engaged that fall. And then 8 weeks before our wedding, my dad died. So God brought Sam to me at this, like the exact moment that I so desperately needed that. So we get married and I'm working, and I actually had a good friend of mine come over. It was Christmas time. I remember this again. It's that whoosh of thought. It's like, I just feel like there are times when God puts thoughts in my head that I know he put them there because I didn't think them. And she said, "Hey, I've joined the John Maxwell team. Would you have any interest in that?" And the whoosh said, "Yes, do it." So I did. And this was like December 29th, I joined. I was going for training in February. And I said to Sam the first week of January, I just gone back to work. I said, "Gosh, there's so much stuff to learn in this, this online university. And I wish I had more time to really dig into it before I go for this training." And 2 days later, my position was eliminated. And I was like, okay, wait. I was going to do this on the side and then build up the business. And I felt like God was saying, go do it now. So I jumped. I had no clue how to start a business. I'd done other things, but I'd not done that. So that's been my journey the last, almost 5.5 years now. And through that process, how long after your parents died did this opportunity come to you? So Daddy died in 2013, and this would have been January of 2015.
So 2 years.
Yeah.
Like I know that's huge though, right? I mean, like to lose both parents in a short amount of time, to then say, okay, and I'm going to try to trust and love again. Yeah. Right. I'm going to get married now. And then I know it's your story and how it how it has ended. So it's and then this, but I want to let our, viewers and our listeners just let this sink in for a minute, that this could have been fold up the shop. We're done again. Yeah. It could have been, God, the divorce was one thing, but taking both my parents and this and that. And I'm sure there are moments where you were in a boxing match with God again and Matt again. But that is, for one, just to affirm you of your tenacity and your perseverance to continue to press through in times like that. But that's enormous. And I'm guessing we could probably talk for another 3 hours of little ways during those seasons that God was showing up and saying, "Hey, I'm still here. I got you through the last one. I'm going to get you through this one. But that's a lot, Amy.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Thank you for saying that. It's really interesting when it is your story and you've lived it, you can say, oh, and then this happened and this happened. But when I really stop and think about that, yeah, there were some tough times. And I mean, that's only a part of the story. Like there's so many other pieces of things that happened during that time that I look back now and I'm like, really? So if you will allow me, I'll tell you one other thing this is like a blow your mind God story. So my mom and dad had this amazing home, their dream home. They had built beautiful garden. Like we're talking huge garden with waterfall and ponds and all this kind of stuff. And when they passed, my son and his wife wanted to buy the house, but they couldn't afford it. So we had to sell the house really hard. You know, my sisters and I are cleaning out this home that we've loved for years. And a year ago, October, my son called me and he goes, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And he goes, "We just bought Nan and Granddad's house." I was like, "What?" So 6 years later, he said, I was on the computer and it just popped up that the house was for sale. They went and looked at it, put an offer. It was accepted. They didn't even have their house on the market yet. So they called their realtor and said, can you put this on the market?
Yeah.
Put it on the market before they even had their first, they were supposed to have like the pictures, you know, and all that before you list it. The realtor calls and says, "I've got somebody that wants to see it." They came through the house, gave them a cash offer, and within less than a week, their house sold. They bought my mom and dad's, and then a month or two later, they moved into my mom and dad's house. So my grandkids are growing up in the house that my mom and dad built, and my son and I are now working to restore that garden. So it's like, that is God at work.
Yeah. Well, I keep coming back to your three words of hurt, learn, and receive.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be just the constant plot in some ways of your life. And honestly, I don't think it's not yours. I think it's the blueprint in some ways for everybody, is that like life is painful. You're not getting away from it, right? Yeah. You're going to experience hurt, but in every step of the way for you, you've leaned into what God, who He is and what He's got for you. You've learned from this. And then every one of these situations, there's this new wave of receiving blessing, favor, providential opportunities, whether that's jobs, houses, relationships. I mean, I that right there may be the takeaway of the whole episode of just listen, wherever you're at in the process, that's where it goes. So good, Amy.
Yeah. You know what? I really appreciate that you brought that out, because I've talked about this many, many times, but I never thought about it exactly that way. But that really is the way life is, because you're going to continue to have the hurts. I remember at one point thinking, after I survived my divorce, I'm done with hurt now. I've had my, my moment.
Yeah. Check it off the list.
Wrong. Like, who knew that there were going to be all these other things that were going to happen? So even that, just knowing that, okay, there will be another one. And as long as you keep taking those steps, you can learn through it, and you can then get to the other side and have good things happen.
Makes me think of Maxwell's Falling. Was it Falling Forward?
Yes.
When I used to do a decent John Maxwell impersonation, but he'd be like, "My name is John, and I'm your friend."
Yes.
And if you fail, hey, while you're down there, pick something up. You might not be there for a while. Whatever. That's a bad John Maxwell impersonation. But
no, you're right. You're right.
I remember him saying that one. When you fail and you fall down, pick something up. Right. I love John Maxwell, but yeah, it is. I mean, you hope you don't get back there, but you do. But it's an opportunity to learn things that, and like you said, none of these, and I think everybody feels this way, is when we go through, pain or failure, none of us want to order that off the menu of life, right? None of us are like, you know what I'll take? I'll take the death of a friend, or, whatever it is. I'll take downsizing from a job, please. None of us order it, but when Jesus says, hey, in this life, you're going to have struggles of many kind, but take heart because I've overcome the world. Like, It's going to happen. You're going to have failure. You're going to have hurt. You're going to have pain. But he's with us in it, and he's always there pulling us into something new. So you jump into the Maxwell coaching, you get downsized. Now you're able to go full in and take us to that. And then let's get, while we still have a little bit of time, take us into getting into that. And then let's talk about the book.
So I've done a lot of things through that. I've been able to do some keynote speaking, which I love. I think part of it because I am a former teacher.
Yeah.
I have that in me. And what I say now is I kind of joke that now my audiences actually like listen attentively and don't fall out of their chairs while I'm talking. Good thing. But one of the other things that I've really loved is I facilitate, I call it like learning discussions with teams of people around these topics of leadership and growth and communication. And what has been so fabulous about that is watching people have their own transformational moments as they're going through things, answering questions that maybe they hadn't ever been asked before. I think a lot of times in teams, organizations could say, oh, we'll send you to learn a skill for your job. Great. But they don't look at kind of like the inside part of people, kind of like the health side. And that is something that the vast array of resources I have with the John Maxwell team allows me to do and help people with that. So that has been one of those things that I didn't even realize how much I would love that. But watching a team go from maybe kind of dysfunctional, I've got one team I'm thinking of in particular where they were working together, but not really together. And I've been with them now for a couple of years, and to just watch the transformation in even how they relate to each other, like they have gotten to the point now where they have offsite meetings or family gatherings and they have their families come and get together. That would never have happened 2 years ago if we hadn't gone through all the different, discussions and books and things that we have. So that kind of thing just, I don't know, it really fills my cup because it feels like I am helping other people kind of experience that transformation of growth that I have experienced.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. I mean, it goes back, right? It's, the hurt, the learning, the receiving. I mean, it happens with every one of the teams too. So good. So get us into the book. You decided, I guess I'm an author now too. Like how did God bring you into that?
Yeah. So I never planned to write the book. I started growing my email list, and two of my mentors said, you have to be communicating often. Like, what do you mean? Like once a month? They're like, oh, no. Like at least once a week. I'm like, once a week? I can't write once a week. Well, you need to. So I started writing these stories every week. And what happened was I really do feel like the more you start paying attention to things, the more you start seeing them. And it's like everywhere around me, I would see these little things in life. That's like, ooh, there's a leadership principle, or there's a personal growth principle around that story. So I wrote stories for probably, almost a year. And then I realized someone told me, Seth Godin takes his blogs and puts them into a book. Yeah. And I thought, well, if Seth Godin can do it, I can do it. So I didn't know how to write a book, but I took all those stories and I put them into this book that really, it's called Seeing Blind Spots, Leadership Lessons from Real Life. And it's short little stories that at the end, I have 2 questions that are about leading a team, and then 2 questions that are more about a personal side related to that story. So it's one of those things that I literally didn't say I'm going to write this book, but it all sort of came together. And again, learning, I had to find out how to do all that. So yeah, it's available on Amazon, and it's also on my website at amybarg.com.
amybarg.com. So you've got the book, which I want you guys go out and go check it out. It's on Amazon, easy way to get it. You've also got it's like a checklist that you have for people to help kind of understand their need for personal growth. Talk about that real quick. I want you to make sure we get that resource to people.
Sure. I call it blind spot glasses because when it comes to growth, whether people have never thought about growing themselves, or they read a book once and said, I should do something with that. Or maybe they've invested a lot of money in their personal growth. I know that there's a problem, and that is you still have blind spots around your growth. And we all have them. That's why they're called blind spots. Yeah. And so this handout actually walks you through 8 really common spots, gaps that we have when it comes to growing ourselves. And it doesn't just tell you, hey, here are the 8, but then it gives you a little something that you can do to try to help yourself deal with one of those. So one of mine, I'll just be honest, is comparison. And you might not think, well, why would that keep you from growing? Well, if you look at what somebody else is doing and you compare yourself to that and you think, oh, they're better, they're faster, they're farther along, that can be something that will stop you from going ahead to grow. And so I've kind of had to learn the hard way that that really isn't going to serve me well. One of the times when I got a new job, well, actually the first job I got right out of teaching, I went to work in an office where everything they did was on a computer. And I didn't know anything about a computer. And so I worked with this young guy who was like almost young enough to be my son. And I would watch him do all these things. And I'm thinking, I don't know how to do that. And I remember the day I thought, okay, I have to just swallow my pride, get over myself and go, Brian, could you help me here? And I have vivid memories of sitting with my little yellow legal pad and going, could you just tell me one more time, how do I attach the Word document to the email?
Yeah.
And, I mean, really, it was that bad. But looking back, I realized if I had just spent all my time comparing myself to him going, you're not that good, you'll never be that good, I wouldn't have learned from him the way I did. So that's just one. There's 8 of them. So I love to help people kind of open their eyes, put on their glasses to see which of those might be holding them back in their own growth. So that's on my website.
They can get that just by going to the website?
Yeah. Right on the homepage, you scroll to the bottom, there's a little button. It actually, I think right now it says subscribe. I'm trying to get it changed to blind spot glasses, but I haven't, that's technology. I haven't figured that out yet. But if you hit subscribe, it'll ask you for your email address and then I will send it right to you.
And that's at amybarg.com.
.com.
BARG.
No
E.
No E. Right.
We will post all those links when we post this this episode on YouTube, and as well we'll post it on the show notes. And so, Amy, I wish we had time for another whole conversation, because I know you've got stories upon stories, and I love it. You've given us some inspiration today. You've given us some really practical takeaways, and I know that's what you're doing with your coaching. That's why you're being asked to speak, and I'm just so stoked about the journey that's brought you to becoming who God's created you to be. And the recap, right? Hurt, learn, receive. That is the golden takeaway right there. Oh, and we're back from the interview with Amy Barg. And see, didn't you feel better about that? I did. The interview stopped, and then we had the dream chimes. Boom. It felt like we transported from that interview to this interview. What's crazy is, what if I don't know about it? What if I accidentally hit that button again? Where are we going? I don't know. It's time travel. Hard to say. Okay, sorry. I love the buttons. And I love the interview with Amy Barg. I think you could tell listening to it, and if you were watching it here on YouTube, there were just times that Amy would take a corner turn in the conversation, and it was just heavy. Looking at her story, that the fact that she went to a place where she had her life was figured out. She was living the dream, if you will, right? She had her family, her husband, the state figured out, the job figured out. Like, this was the long-term plan. She knew the path and where things were going. And then as things unfold and the dream that she had been guided by and living is just in shambles, is dead in front of her. Just seeing the path she took and how gracious God was to lead her in, the fact that, coming back to what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, right? That God's gifts and his call, his purpose for your life, it's irrevocable. The sin of her husband, the whole struggle, all of that, like, it couldn't stop what God was doing in her life. And now she's dreaming a new dream. Now she's at this point of really being able to, like, once again, that quote, right? She was hurt enough that she had to change. Then she learned enough, right, that she wanted to change. And then she received enough from others and from God into the process that she was able to change. I know that hit you, because we're all in a struggle together to lead this life that God has created us and called us to live. And that's why we're going to bring you great content like that every single week here on the Daron Earlewine Podcast. And if you want to stay connected to Amy Barg, I said it already in the interview there, but amybarg.com. She's doing life coaching with her work with John Maxwell. Like John Maxwell has said there, sometimes maybe next week I'll do the whole podcast as John Maxwell. Hello, my name is John. I'm your friend. I used to do a better John Maxwell, but that's it. My middle name is John, so it wouldn't be a lie if I were to do that throughout this podcast every once in a while. Maybe here's what I'll do. I'll hit the dream button, and then I'll come back as John Maxwell. I'll be like this. Hello, my name is John, and I'm your friend. And then I hit this button, and then it's Daron again. All right, that's enough of the sound effects. Hey, it's time to go, guys. It's been an absolute blast. Episode 1 of the Daron Earlewine Podcast. We got the logo back here. We got an Edison bowl. We got all the stuff. We're gonna have a different coffee mug maybe next week too. I don't know. We're gonna get crazy, and hopefully we'll have you and hundreds more of your friends. And on that point, what I want to say is, if you do me a huge favor, if you've enjoyed even 5 seconds of this podcast, maybe 5 minutes, maybe all 25 minutes. Here's what I'd love for you to do is to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're listening to it, listening to the podcast on audio, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could leave a review, it'd be, here, like, I'll even give you a little template. It could be like, I listen to lots of podcasts, but this one is the greatest one ever. It's changed my life. I'll never be the same. You should listen to, and then like 4 or 5 exclamation points. Something like that will work great as a review. Wait. There was a laugh track. It helps me. There's nobody here. I'm just staring at a camera. I need the laugh track here. I would love for you guys to leave a review, to subscribe, and to like and share it with somebody that you know that needs to know these 3 things. And I'm going to tell you every single week. I'm going to end it, the podcast just like this. It's this. Is God is near you. He's not far away. Pandemic, no school, whatever it is. God is near you in this. He's not far away from you. God is for you. He's not against you. And here's the last one, is he's created you on purpose and for a purpose. And guess what? That purpose, your talents, your gifts, and your calling, they are irrevocable, friend. God bless you. And we will talk to you next time right here on the Daron Earlewine Podcast. I love you, folks. Next week, you, me, all these buttons. We might get new sound effects. Maybe if you got a great sound effect you want to hear on the Daron Earlewine Podcast, just send it to me. My email is just Daron@blackbirdmission.com, or jump on the socials, Facebook, Instagram, just search Daron Earlewine, and tell me what sound effects you want to hear, and we'll drop it right here in the mix. Hey, we got to go. Love you guys. See you next week. No, I won't see it. You'll see me. You can hear me. You know how it works. God bless. Next week, coming at you, the Daron Earlewine Podcast.